Miracles in the Quran that not everyone knows. The word malaika, which means angels, occurs 88 times in the Quran. The word shayateen, which means devils, also occurs exactly 88 times in the Quran. The word yawm, which means day, in the non-specific singular form, occurs 365 times in the Quran, which is exactly the amount of days there are in a year. The word ayyam, which means days in the plural form, occurs 30 times in the Quran, which is the amount of days in a month. The word shahr, which means month, occurs exactly 12 times in the whole Quran, which is also the amount of months in a year. And there are many, many, many more miracles like this. So if you guys want a part 2, let me know. Miracles of the Quran, part 2. The word al-dunya, which means this world, occurs 115 times in the Quran. Similarly, the word al-akhirah, which means the next world, occurs also 115 times. Al-haya, which means life, occurs 145 times, and al-maut, which means death, occurs 145 times. The word al-salihat, which means good deeds, occurs 167 times in the whole Quran, and the word al-sayyi'at, which means bad deeds, also occurs 167 times in the whole Quran. What's interesting is how Allah describes the sun in the Quran. He calls the sun a siraj, which means a lamp, and as you know, lamps give off their own light. Now when Allah describes the moon, al-qamar, He calls the moon a munir, which is something that gets its light from something else. Now 1400 years ago, people thought that the moon gave off its own light, and modern science tells us that that's incorrect. The moon actually reflects its light from the sun, and that's the great miracle in this. And there are many more like this, so let me know if you guys want a part 3. Miracles of the Quran, part 3. Now, a common theme in the Quran, when Allah talks about creating something, He usually says فَخَلَقْنَا, which means to create. For example, فَخَلَقْنَا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, which means we created the heavens and the earth. However, in Surah number 57, when Allah talks about creating hadid, which is iron, something different happens. He says وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيد, which means we brought down iron. And for the longest, scholars were actually confused about this, but fast forward many, many years later, and science actually tells us iron is not from the earth. Heavy elements such as iron and gold and silver are produced at the core of a dying star many times larger than our sun. And when a really massive star reaches the end of its life, it explodes into what's called a supernova. And with that supernova, those elements get spread throughout the universe, and that's how iron got to Earth. And this basically matches up perfectly with how Allah describes iron, which وَأَنزَلْنَا, we brought it down. And of course, there are many more, so if you want a part 4, let me know. Miracles in the Quran, part 4. In Surah number 21, Allah says, إِنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ كَانَ رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا. And a general translation for this is that the heavens and the earth were once joined into one unit, and then we split them apart. And keep in mind, this was revealed 1400 years ago. Now fast forward to 1927, a man by the name of George Lemaitre discovered that all the celestial bodies in the universe were actually moving away from each other, and that if you rewind time, all the mass in the universe comes back to a singular point. And what he theorized is that the origin of our universe was that all the mass was in one point and then it split apart. And this is commonly known as the Big Bang Theory, and this is widely accepted by scientists everywhere. And the miracle in this is that this is very, very similar to when Allah says, إِنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ كَانَ رَتْقًا. Ratqan means to be joined or inseparable, and فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا is to be split apart. And there's actually 2 more miracles in this verse, so if you guys want a part 5, let me know. Miracles in the Quran, part 5. In Surah number 51, Allah says, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لِمُوسِعُونَ. And a general translation for this is that verily we built the heavens with craftsmanship and we are still expanding it. Keep in mind, this was revealed 1400 years ago, and for a majority of human history, people thought that the universe remained a constant size. It wasn't until 1929 that a man by the name of Edwin Hubble conducted an observation, and he found that all the neighboring galaxies were actually moving away from us. And Hubble, along with other scientists at the time, including George Lemaitre, which I mentioned in part 4, came to the conclusion that our universe started with a Big Bang and that it has been expanding ever since, even to this day. And this is very similar to how Allah describes the heavens when Allah says لِمُوسِعُونَ, which means we are still expanding it. And if you guys want a little bit more clarity, go ahead and watch part 4, and if you guys want a part 6, let me know. Miracles in the Quran, part 6. In Surah number 36, when Allah describes the sun, the moon, and the earth, Allah says وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. And a general translation for this is that they all swim or float in their own orbits. Now keep in mind this was revealed 1400 years ago, where a majority of people thought that the earth was standing still and that everything revolved around us. Now when you fast forward many years later, modern science actually tells us that the moon has an orbit around the earth has an orbit around the sun, and in fact the sun has an orbit around the Milky Way galaxy. And keep in mind how Allah uses yasbahun, which means to swim or to float. And this is the perfect word to use because people back then didn't know that you were weightless in space, and so floating or swimming would be a perfect way to describe it. And the big miracle in this is that Allah says even the sun has an orbit, which was only recently discovered. And if you pay attention, kullun fi falak is actually a palindrome, with the first letter being the same as the last, second and second to last, and so on. And ya is the first letter of yasbahun. Miracles in the Quran, part 7. In Surah number 13, when Allah says, وَمِن كُلِّ الثَّمَرَاتِ جَعَلَ فِيهَا زَوْجَيْنِ اثْنَيْنِ. And a general translation for this is that, and of all fruits, He placed therein two spouses, male and female. Now keep in mind this was revealed 1400 years ago, and back then when they observed animal life, it was clear that there was a male and female, but it was unclear how plants reproduced. From what they could see back then, a plant grew, flowered, and then out of that flower came a fruit. Now, modern biology tells us that the flower that is present before it turns into a fruit is actually a reproductive organ that has a male and female part. The male part of the flower is called a stamen, and this produces pollen to fertilize other flowers. And the female part is called an ovary, and once it receives pollination, it will grow into what you know as a fruit. And the miracle in this is that it matches up perfectly when Allah says, and of all fruits we place therein two spouses, male and female. And you guys already know, if you want a part 8, let me know.